Next on the agenda is Drew Mansour, ED of the Mansfield Center. So stick around for our next special guest presentation.
At lunch? What? Oh, you guys got
Yeah, I can send this to you. Here's a.
probably water.
Thank you.
Well, until they get tall.
Are you recording this for yourself or for?
The YouTube. It's live streaming for the YouTube.
Great, thank you. Yeah, he needs all the. It's like a name. I didn't have any idea who he was.
Yeah. No, it's great.
Hey, Bill. I missed you on the hike.
Are you sure? That's weird, but it probably. I understand how that goes because I lose things all the time. Next time, if I know I'm going to go, I'll give you a call. If I don't get something for it, because I had the
Please.
car work there.
Well,
Sound like a nice trip?
it was a great trip. Bass Creek, it was wonderful. The weather was perfect, of course. So good for the people.
Is it happening?
Oh yeah, it's in the second day. They've torn. It's not. It's a disaster.
Can I come and see them?
Oh, if you want to just stop in, Jan and I are both trying to stay out of the house. They've gotten the master bedroom done. Yesterday, they spent the whole day tearing up the vinyl flooring in the kitchen.
Oh, you're going to do
which
it
is
too?
disaster.
And they're putting down sofas?
They're putting down.
Oh no, this isn't tongue and groove.
This is a engineered or floating, about that wide, 5 feet long. Yeah, locking everything. Yeah, I guess. Well, Jan researched it and said, this is what we should
It's
do.
not 3/4 inch from North Carolina.
No, it's not hickory or oak. It's an oak. It's oak. It's real wood on the top, but it's engineered. But the disaster in the kitchen, she was about beside herself. They knocked out the baseboard.
No, you keep talking. You keep talking.
I can hug and talk at the same time.
Good to see you. Lovely to meet you.
Bill
We might have met.
except the rattlesnake.
Yeah.
This woman is electable. If you're in her area, you smell good. What did you think? That's what that. Yum. What does it remind me of? There was one that the men used to wear way back in the 70s. That had that Saints.
I'm sure it's very earthy.
It's really good. See ya. But so Jan was freaking. They knocked out the baseboard supporting the dishwasher, so it was down at an angle. She couldn't run the dishwasher, and so she said, "I hope they fix." I said, "Most people move out of their house when this is done. They didn't want to do that, so they fixed the boards in our." Well, yesterday was so slow it freaked her out. They spent the whole day tearing up 2 layers of fine. And that was the problem. Thank you. You're welcome. I think I picked this up last week. And when they did the dedication, I was there for that. All right. Good to see you.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm going to give my own introduction. I'm Dina Mansour. I'm the Executive Director of the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Center. And I'm really honored to be here to talk to you about Mike Mansfield. And more than most of my audiences, you probably know all about Mike Mansfield, and maybe you will be correcting me as I go along. So I'm very open to suggestions for how I can improve this. I'm also really glad there's a couple people in the audience that I know have been involved in Mansfield programs. Nancy Saldin has long been a supporter of our international programs. And then Robin has hosted as well, and maybe some of the others of you have as well. But I'm going to start by talking a bit about Mike Mansfield and who he was. And this is just the quintessential Montana story, right? That he grew up in Great Falls, was a juvenile delinquent, ran away from home a number of times. He actually lived in an orphan home for a year. And when he was 14, he lied about his age to run away and join the military. And he served in 3 branches of the military before he returned to Montana and worked in the Butte copper mines. So working in the Butte copper mines, he had not even gotten his high school degree, had a high school diploma, but he met Maureen. And Maureen was a school teacher, and she said, you have a lot of potential, go to the University of Montana right here, which changed his life. He attended the University of Montana. He was a faculty member here, taught Far Eastern and Latin American studies before he was elected to the House and then the Senate, where he became our nation's longest-serving Senate Majority Leader. And in Congress, of course, he led at a very turbulent time. Vietnam War, assassinations, riots, Watergate, shepherded the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and was just very instrumental as someone from Montana who emerged into being our nation's greatest statesman, as David Broder said when Mansfield passed away in 2001. Because of the way he governed, with humility, with integrity, by reaching across the aisle, working in the best interests of the country, he was nominated by President Carter to serve as the American ambassador to Japan. And when Jimmy Carter nominated him, he said, you'll be based in Japan, but you're really our ambassador to Asia. And because of his value, usually political appointees are asked to leave when another administration comes in. Ronald Reagan asked him to stay. So this is really a distinguished legacy of being able to put country over self and country over partisan challenges. So when we look at the Mansfield Way, these are the issues that we consider. That he was known for bridging divides, civil discourse, civic education, supporting youth, having a global perspective, and doing all this with integrity and humility and compassion. So So the mission of the Mansfield Center is to honor that legacy. We were founded by an act of Congress in 1983. We're based right here at the University of Montana. We're an academic unit, and our objective is to foster globally minded leaders of integrity. And that brings together our dual mission of supporting ethics and public affairs and U.S. global engagement. The focus has traditionally been on Asia, and right now, obviously, President Trump is in China. The U.S.-China relationship is one of the most important in the world, but we engage globally, that we are currently active in about 120 countries, given all the alumni we have supported through our various programs. So, if you look at this slide, these are the values that we think are really important here in our community in Missoula and the state across the country when we strengthen democracy, leadership, and national security. So we have three pillars of our work at the Mansfield Center. We support leadership and public service, democracy and civic education, and Indo-Pacific and international studies more broadly. We have a lot of programs throughout all of these themes. We are based, as I said, at the University of Montana, but we have a variety of target audiences. We don't just support students and faculty. Some of you may be familiar with our Mansfield Dialogues. These are community conversations that support all demographics. We have programs in middle school, high school, university. We have programs that are just in Western Montana, across the state, across the country. So when we look at what we have to offer in terms of leadership and public service, we do have academic courses on leadership and public policy. We're looking at supporting a civic knowledge initiative on a university level so that we are better able to support engaged, empowered citizens in our country. We also support public service in terms of national security with our nation's military, that we have something called the Defense Critical Language and Culture Program, where we honor that Mansfield commitment to the military by providing language and geopolitical and cultural studies to our nation's military. At one point, we taught up to 13 languages that demonstrate what our national security priorities are. It might be Chinese and Russian, or it could be Tagalog for the Philippines or Norwegian. It's actually kind of crazy, the kind of languages that are a priority in our country. And then we provide student scholarships that woven through all our programs is that recognition that Mike Mansfield came from a very low income background, and we want to support all the people in Montana. So almost all of our programs are completely free and open to the public, and the scholarships that we provide are based on students demonstrating a commitment to ethics and public affairs, and we recently just gave away about $5,000 in scholarships to university students. We also do a number of things to strengthen civic education. Last year, in all the DOGE cuts and all the other turmoil of the new administration, we lost about $23 million in funding, and that was 80 jobs lost right here at the University of Montana. At the Mansfield Center, we still have about 27 employees, but one of the critical programs that we lost was something that was deeply aligned with national security and any administration's priorities. It was through the National Defense Education Program at the Department of Defense, and it was to support civic education in our communities. So we lost a $9 million grant to do that. We do actually, under this administration, have a new 3-year, $2.7 million program to basically do the same thing. So they cut one program and then they restored it. But it's through the Department of Education. So we're doing a variety of programs. This is a particular outreach to high school students. So there's a variety of programs listed here. I'd like to highlight one, the Democracy Video Series. And this is something that's very unique for Montana audiences, but usable throughout the whole country. It is a series of 20 videos that can be used. We're first at the 11th grade level, then 8th grade level, then 5th grade level, and they're very short videos recognizing decreased attention spans, 2.5-minute videos that will be repurposed for TikTok and social media, and they're about different elements in democracy: the executive, the legislative, the judiciary, using the example of executive privilege and Watergate, talking about the Civil Rights Act, talking about the Voting Rights Act. But what is special about these videos is that they all use a Mansfield example. He was the one that led the Watergate hearings. He was the one who led the Voting Rights Act. It talks about, with the legislative piece, his role as the Senate Majority Leader and how he looked at the Senate as an essential core of our democracy. So these videos will be done in August, and we're hoping to have them in every high school in the state. We do work in every county in Montana, and then again to take it down through the middle school and elementary school levels. Another thing we're doing is we work with the National Chamber of Commerce on the Civics Beat. This is something that supports middle schoolers in writing an essay about something that they would do to contribute to their home community, and then they go through a series of regional bees. We did one in Miles City, Helena, and Kalispell, before it culminates in a state civics bee, and then the winner of that goes to Washington, D.C. Can I just check, how much time do I have?
You have until 7:05.
Oh, okay, I've got plenty of time. Okay, so this is a variety of things, and I'm happy to revisit any of these if you're interested, that like the election monitoring at the Carter Center and things like that. Indo-Pacific and international studies. This is something that's really important as we educate the people of Montana on how we are involved in a global economy. And when you look at working with the Montana Farmers Union and the Taiwanese government writing a commitment to buy $1.3 billion of Montana wheat, really important that the Mansfield Center use the expertise that we have to educate communities on relations with East Asia and the world. So we do offer courses here, we offer workshops, we have student and scholar exchanges. For example, right now we have a scholar from Taiwan in residence who teaches culture and language classes. We have fully funded trips for high school students to go to Korea and Taiwan. Right now we have 10 UN students in Taiwan on a 2-week exchange. And then we have public dialogues on these issues. So, for example, a couple weeks ago, we had our Mansfield Chair on Japanese and Indo-Pacific Studies in the talk with economist Bryce Ward about the tariffs. Here we are a year after Liberation Day. What is the impact on American communities? What are we seeing in our home budgets? What will happen down the road? And so the Mansfield Center feels like we can support communities in interpreting some of these global issues. So I just wanted to run through some of these Mansfield quotes. That Mansfield died in 2001, right? This is the 25th anniversary of his passing this year on October 5th. He grew up in a very different era, right? But he was remarkably forward-thinking and very progressive in his support for democracy, for community, for rights for all people. So even back in 1940, he was seeing the challenges of democracy, right? Democracy was not an easy thing to achieve. It will not be an easy thing to maintain. We look at democracy today and we look at the urban-rural divide, and we look at the fact that about 60% of youth, of rural youth, live in civic deserts. Now, that really depends on how you interpret civic deserts. You had Mike up here earlier, and he was talking about how it's pretty challenging to get Indigenous people to engage in elections because is democracy for them? And when you look at these statistics on civic deserts, this includes most of the reservations in Montana. Now, are those civic deserts in the way they support one another and family and communities? No, they probably do that much better than most urban areas. But in terms of the civic desert, in terms of formal volunteer opportunities to participate in elected office, formal opportunities to participate on a public committee or on an initiative, it's harder in these areas. And so we have this urban-rural divide that I think is increasingly challenging for us in this country, where people in the cities are pitted against people in more rural areas. So these are one of the things that we're trying to address at the Mansfield Center, and we're one of the few places in rural America addressing this. There are plenty of institutions on the coast, right? If you look at Harvard, Stanford, kind of the usual suspects, but you have this vast middle of the country where there aren't a lot of centers like the Mansfield Center that are actually part of the community that is really underestimated in these larger policy conversations. And threats to democracy put our economy at risk. I mean, you can passionately care about our nation's ideals and values, But there's also the very pragmatic perspective, and you see that today, right, in terms of tariff impact, in terms of uncertainty in the markets. But when you look at threats to democracy, the Chamber of Commerce has said civics education must become a national priority. This is why they're doing things like sponsoring the National Civics Week. 85% of business leaders say capitalism depends on a well-functioning democracy. 72% of business leaders say American democracy is at risk. 83% believe that U.S. companies, or 83% of those polled think U.S. companies should have a role in upholding democracy. This is kind of the challenging statistic that 49% of Americans trust business more than they trust nonprofits, more than government, and more than the media. So having business as a partner in the work that we're doing is really important in getting into segments of our country that are really questioning where the leadership is and how our country should be coming together. So when we look at the Mansfield legacy, it's really about protecting democratic institutions. And some of the issues that we are dealing with today are partisan polarization, challenges to the Constitution, challenges to the separation of powers, challenges to the judiciary, free speech, support of the media, and money in politics. And these are all things that are not partisan issues. We are a non-partisan organization. We have a bipartisan board. Mark Roscoe is a member of our board, and quite honestly, we have been attacked for having people that are perceived as partisan on our board. Someone who ran the Republican National Committee and was one of the highest ranking Republicans in our country, and we are now being attacked because he is not a true Republican. So we have people from both sides of the aisle on our board. We try to represent people of all backgrounds. I talk here to Democrats. I talk to the Pachyderm Club, that we try to bring people of all ideologies and perspectives together to talk about these challenging issues. And until recently, these were not considered partisan topics. But when we talk about democracy, we are accused of being partisan. So now, of course, maybe this is a sensitive topic for Democratic gathering, but Missoula Democrats. But this was Mansfield's hierarchy of loyalty: the country first, then Montana, then the Senate, then the party. That he worked across party lines, and he did things that were in the best interest of the country. Now, Montana, of course, was very dear to him. He was the congressman from Montana, even though he was the Senate Majority Leader, even when he was the U.S. Ambassador to Japan. The biggest wall hanging he had was a map of the state of Montana. So another quote from Mansfield. You know, I've been asked, you know, what can we do? What is important right now? Well, to use your voice. And Mansfield said, exercise your privilege of voting and speak up for democracy. Ballots are bullets these days, and through them you make your wishes known, back in 1946. In terms of unity, nothing can be accomplished with both sides standing back and calling each other names. This was something in 1979 when he was navigating between warring ecology groups and industry groups. Compromise. He was very big into compromise, regardless of where we come from, no matter what our color or background. We all initially sprang from the same source. We'll have to set examples for those who will follow us and recognize that we don't know it all. So we should listen to the other person, and that the other person sometimes is right and we are wrong. It will be a matter of accommodation, compromise, knowledge, and understanding. And this was in a speech he gave to American youth in 1989, that he was very passionate about supporting youth. And when he had retired from the Senate and his former aides were saying to him, what is your legacy? What do you want to happen? And he was very humble, and he didn't want anything to be named for him, but he and Maureen agreed that their commitment was to youth, and they wanted the center named for them to be based at a university to reach out to university students, high school students, and youth at large. To engage with the world, to not be isolationist. This is a picture of him in China. He actually was one of the first who advocated for engagement with China. Not that we would have to agree on everything, not that we would have to compromise our values, but to recognize that our country and our world is better off when you can actually bridge divides and have conversation. So he was considered the expert of Congress on China. He was one of the first to be invited to China, but Nixon wanted to be the first in 1972. 2 months later, Mike Mansfield led the first congressional delegation to China, bipartisan delegation, and actually spent about 3 weeks in China. And he said that a decent future for the people of the United States cannot be found by shutting a non-existent door. We need the rest of the world even as it needs us. In short, the challenge is to look outward with new perceptions, even as we turn inward to build a new at home. He had been designated multiple times to be part of delegations to the United Nations. He believed that alliances made our country stronger. He believed that we could have more economic and regional security by working together with allies. Humility. This was another core value that we espouse at the Mansfield Center. Mansfield said this is the land of opportunity and progress, and this is the land of equal protection and equal participation. We are proud to be considered citizens, but at the same time, our pride is tempered by humility, because we are well aware that only through recognizing our weaknesses have we achieved our strength. So we do quite a bit, as I mentioned, in terms of engaging with the community. We have a number of dialogues in person and virtual. They're quite popular. We usually have upwards of 300 people registering. Registering allows people not only to come in person or virtually, but to have access to the recording later. So this is a selection of how we've supported the community in the spring. We did a session about a week after the U.S. invaded Venezuela. We had a conversation around democracy with this mural, and I'll address this mural in a minute. We had a talk by a Georgetown University professor on executive power and its limits. We had a session on what was happening basically in Minnesota and comparing it to, not working? Oh, but I think it's gonna die again.
Put it in your house.
Okay, I think the battery may,
Sorry.
should I use that?
Let me just give you this. You want to turn it on?
Thank you.
Turn it off.
What? Anyone have a battery? Well, I can keep trying and then I'll go louder. Yeah. Okay.
Just
So-
put it in your
Is
chair.
that working? Okay, all right. We have had issues on Ukraine and Iran and the tariffs. So, you know, this is one way that we really want to invite you in, and this is one reason that I love to talk to communities, because we really want to hear from you, that we want your opinions on speakers that you'd like to hear from, topics that are important, organizations that we could come and address. So we are working now on our fall schedule. As I mentioned, it is the 25th anniversary.
I think we can hear you pretty good.
Yeah.
Move on down if you need to.
Okay, I can speak very loud. Can you hear me?
All right.
Okay. So, we're looking at our 25th anniversary programming. So, it's the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. It's the 25th anniversary of 9/11, and it's the 25th anniversary of the passing of Mike Mansfield. So, it's also, you know, we have a big election in November. So, how can we celebrate who we are as a people, what we aspire to be, and bring in speakers that reinforce the messages that bring our community together around these issues that relate to the Mansfield ideals? So I'm going to go back to this mural, and you can't see it very well, but the Mansfield Center, we do a lot of talks. We do a lot of research. We write a lot of op-eds, but we want to reach people where they are. And one thing we hadn't done very well is reach people visually. And so we commissioned a local Missoula artist, Hadley Ferguson, who has the women's mural in the Montana State Capitol, or the Heart of Missoula mural down on Broadway in Higgins. We commissioned her to do a series of 3 murals on Mike Mansfield. So this this is the first one. This is the early beginnings, and it talks about his love for Montana, his challenged upbringing, running away from home, his commitment to the military, his work in the Butte copper mines, and you can't see it in this picture, but come to the Mansfield Center on level 4 of the library, because there's just so many cool little things in that. Like, there's this little thing that looks like an oxygen tank, which is a canary resuscitator for the canary in the coal mines. There really were. There's like a little hanging cage up there. They really would send the canary into the coal mine, and it would come out gasping for air. They did not want to buy multiple canaries, so they had a canary resuscitator. So come look and see if you can find the canary resuscitator. And then the beauties of Montana. He was responsible for the passage of the Clean Air Act, and that was based on this experience of loving Montana, of loving the lands that we have access to. And then the center of it is the University of Montana. And you can't see that very well either, but this woman in the bottom right of the circle, she got this walking bookcase. Like, they would actually have people walking around with books in a little bookcase on somebody's back that you could check out on the Oval. So come see that. We just launched the second mural on Wednesday, and as our founding director and historian Dr. Paul Lauren mentioned, it's probably the most political of the series, because it talks about the foundational legislation that Mansfield was responsible for that is at risk now. Medicare, the Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act. It has a chunk on the Clean Air Act. It has a chunk on the Watergate hearings and executive privilege. So come check it out. So it's very interesting, again, to see Mike Mansfield and all he fought to do for our country, and as an inspiration to all of us of, again, who are we as citizens of this country, and what values do we hold dear? And then the third one will be launched around October 5th, the 25th anniversary of his passing, and that's a more global perspective, that we are connected to a global economy. We do benefit more by being connected with global populations, and seeing how he did that with humility and deference and partnership and compromise. So come check out the murals. Other thing that was distributed is, in honor of this 25th anniversary, we're doing a Mansfield Stories project. And this is where we hope everyone will contribute. So I could be traveling in Winifred, and someone will come up to me and say, my grandfather was one of 100 signatories to ask Mansfield to help fund the sewer project in Winifred. And he did, and that changed the town. Or I could be traveling in Billings, and somebody will say, I remember when my 3-year-old sister drowned in the creek behind our house, and one of the first calls we got was Mike Mansfield asking what he could do to help our family. So, there's the stories of almost everybody had a consolation letter that Mike Mansfield tracked deaths in his constituents and sent letters of condolence. So if you have a personal connection, your grandfather, grandmother, father, you yourself, we'd love to hear your story. But it's more than that. It's how the things that Mike Mansfield did for our state and for our country resonate with you today. What do you care deeply about that is something that Mike Mansfield stood for when he represented the state of Montana in Congress? So we'd love for you to scan this QR code, go on our website, and share a story that you have, and also to spread the word, because we really want hundreds and thousands of stories, and depending on what happens, maybe we'll publish a book, or maybe we'll do an exhibit, but we really want to wrap each and every Montanan into being part of that Mansfield legacy. So this is kind of an inspirational final quote from Mike Mansfield, even back in 1975. The nation will withstand the adversity of the present. This nation will find again, in the months and years ahead, the essential political leadership in the presidency and in the Congress. We will renew, we will endure, there is no other choice. So I want to leave you with that, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the center, the Mansfield legacy, the programs that I rushed through in civic education. I know Robin was gonna just mention something about what she does, and then Nancy maybe can even mention how she's been involved at the Mansfield Center, and then I'll go to you.
So last summer, and if Aaron could be here tonight, he'd perfectly well agree with me. Last summer, he and I both served as hosts to one of the Mansfield Center's many programs. What's a formal name? Do you
So
know?
it's the study of the U.S. Institute for Global High School Teachers.
That's right, and so we just had a great time. My teachers, students were from Israel and Italy, and I think were from two of the Nordic countries. And we could host them in any way we wanted, but to help them better understand Montana's history and civics lessons and so forth. So I took my students up to the tribe, to Salish tribe, and we looked at the history and talked to a few people, and I can't remember what else we did a lot of stuff. And I have to say, I learned as much from them as they did from me, or probably more. So I told Dina, you have a new person in charge now, I think. Yeah, that if she emailed me with the dates and so forth, I'd send it out to all of you. So when you get the invitation, I urge you to think about it. It's just a day where you take the students around, and then there's a dinner for everybody at the end.
Well,
It's
thank
fun.
you, Robin. Yeah, so we did lose, again, about $23 million in federal funding. But one of the programs that remained is this U.S. Department of State program. So in the 1960s, I think it was 1963, we were in the midst of the Cold War. We were investing so much money in the defense of our country, and Congress said we actually need to invest more in peace. And so the Fulbright-Hays Act mandated that the U.S. government invest in educational and cultural programs to develop people-to-people relations. So that's like the Fulbright scholarships or other exchanges. And so the study of the U.S. Institute is U.S. State Department exchange, and it brings 20 global high school teachers from around the world. I mean, it's literally 3 per geographic region of the State Department. And what they do is they come and they learn about American democracy, which has been increasingly interesting for them. But also, it's about bonding with one another, right? Like in that group where we had someone from Israel, we also have someone from Palestine. We've had groups that have Russians and Ukrainians together. So it's that dynamic of bringing people together that results in a more peaceful world, that results in a more peaceful America. But they're also here learning about the U.S., and these are teachers of American studies in their countries. So what better way for them to actually teach about America than being here, meeting Montanans, learning about our culture, our values, our history firsthand. And of course, traditionally, this has not been a propaganda program. I actually used to be a diplomat, and Edward R. Murrow had said, we show the U.S. warts and all. And this is what this program does. It shows all aspects of America, but they come back being so impressed by that, and being so impressed by how we build community and how we build our, judicial systems and all that. And so it's a really great way to invest in a better understanding of the U.S. Another program that we just had our last cohort of is the Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative. This is a really critical program because it invests in bolstering sentiment for the U.S. against China. Right? So when China and the U.S. are competing for attention in Vietnam and the Philippines and Indonesia, what better way than to take emerging leaders from those countries, bring them here, introduce them to the U.S., and have them meet Americans. And Nancy, I don't know if you want to say a bit about your experience, but you've hosted dozens of fellows for us over the years. Thank you.
I don't know about dozens, but quite a few. The students come for a month and stay in my home, and we have amazing conversations. A lot of times we'll have a Muslim and a Buddhist and a Jew and a Christian all around the dinner table and just talking about, what do we have in common, and the students, they're not students, they're young professionals, really.
Oh, I have quite a few, but I'll pick two.
Okay.
So leaders, when you talk about leaders, are you talking about just someone in office, like a diplomat, or in a particular office, or just, do you have anything, for example, like a liaison to the EU, or a human rights liaison?
Yeah, so you mean our leadership programs generally?
Right.
So when we talk about fostering globally minded leaders of integrity, it's really just people in the community. How can we all be leaders? How do we foster our youth? How do we take middle school kids and high school kids and university students and have them recognize what those qualities are? So we don't really work with the high level elected leaders so much. Now, when we have a program, for example, like this Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative, some of them are leaders in government or nonprofits or in business. But we take a broader view of leaders, like the leaders that are running this meeting today.
Right now. Okay, and then I was curious more to hear about Maureen's contribution. I think you mentioned her.
I'm sorry, who's?
Maureen, was that Maureen?
Oh, yes, and I'm very bad about this. Maureen was really responsible for Mike's success. And, of course, as you see this so often that, especially in that era, it was the woman behind the man that made it possible. And so he said, basically everything I achieved, we achieved together. And so Maureen was an important part of his ascension, that she is the one that encouraged him to get his degree, to run for office, to take on the ambassadorship role. She really supported him in all his achievements. And in fact, this is kind of the dark side of Mansfield, right? Like we also talk about, warts and all, the warts of Mike Mansfield. Like if you go out to Fort Missoula, he was one of the judges at the internment camp that determined whether Japanese and Italians should continue to be detained. He never liked to talk about that part of his life because he recognized the shame in that. And so Maureen and Mike were so entwined that they actually kind of neglected their daughter, Anne. So when we're looking at these murals and we're talking about, well, should we put their daughter in there, she did not really feel part of that family. Like she did not really connect very much with them. And we're really fortunate that we have one of his descendants on our board, Regan Brandt, lives locally. She's the daughter of Sheila Mansfield Miller. And then at this mural unveiling last week, we had Stephanie Shea, who was the great-grandniece on the Maureen Hayes side. And so we're connected to the family, and they feel very proud of that legacy, but Anne did not feel very connected to her mother and father. But if you look at the legacy that we're the Maureen and Mike Mansfield Center, I often get a communication to the Mike and Maureen Mansfield Center. No, Maureen goes first. Or so the library is Maureen and Mike, and then the statue. So there's a statue in the Mansfield Mall here between the Mansfield Library and the University Center. It's of Maureen and Mike, and then that same statue is in the Montana State Capitol. So she was really critical to his success and enabling him to invest in our country in the way that he did. She was a school teacher, and she also, when he came to get his degree, he got his master's in history, and she also got her master's at the same time. So let me tell one more story about him. One of the stories that was told at this mural unveiling was about how the policies he supported in Congress were based in his life here, right? So Maureen was a social worker, and she saw the challenges of healthcare and why we needed a Medicare down the road. They also were here at the tail end or during the Depression, and they tell the story of how he bought a 3-pound bag of ground beef for 25 cents. And this was a big score, and he brought it home, and she started to cry because they had no refrigerator. Like, she was like, what would I do with 3 pounds of hamburger? And they distribute it to the neighbors. So, again, she was kind of the voice of reason and the reason for remembering some of these core social services that he helped enact in Congress. Okay, sorry, you had, yes.
My involvement is actually through my late husband's involvement, and he was invited. John Balsam was invited to represent the Mansfield Center then he went again, thanks to the Mansfield Center, and it was right before he died. But it was to connect these people together again, because the relations were so close, so personal. And I was able to go the second time, and so I still connect via Facebook or through individual letters, or I connect with all of them still, and it's just you can't beat that, you know, for a connection. It's just person to person, heart to heart. It was lovely.
Jerry, I did not even recognize you. I'm so happy that
That's
you
okay.
said something. So
It's been a long
it's
time.
been a long time. I'm so happy to see you. And John was one of those people who just made such an incredible impact. It was in who he was, his person, like his personality, his core values, and how he welcomed people in. But he made a tangible difference with his business knowledge. Like, he would go to these countries where they have very different entrepreneurial environments and made a huge impact. And again, that benefits our country, because if you have a stronger Cambodia or Myanmar, then there's less of our security at risk in that region. Less that we have to invest militarily, more bolstering against China, more potential for U.S. investment and trade, and that people-to-people engagement was just so valuable.
Oh gosh, I could go on.
It's probably more important now with what people think of us now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More.
Yeah, I'm curious if the university's recent decision to cut some programs like Chinese and Irish, like, does that have any impact on kind of your operations, or what's the interaction with the university around issues like that?
Yeah, you know, I mean, the University of Montana as a liberal arts institution is really critical. So it's painful when we see programs like that either close down or get damaged. Unfortunately, the reality of a university environment is that you have to support the programs with enrollment. So I can't really speculate, but it's clear to me when you see shifts in students voting with their feet, you have to invest for the good of those students. Now, obviously, I think that something like Mandarin Chinese is really important for Americans to learn, right? We are at a disadvantage when we have 300 Americans a year studying in China, and they have 300,000 Chinese a year studying in the United States, right? We cannot be competitive when we don't understand their language, their culture, their way of doing business, their way of engaging with Americans. But I'll just say, in terms of that, it wasn't necessarily the Chinese language program that's been shut down, but Chinese language as a minor, as a degree program. And having myself studied international relations in college, I would actually say it would be more valuable to study something else and pick up the Chinese. Like, I think absolutely we need Mandarin Chinese at the University of Montana, but does it bolster other programs like environmental studies or political science or public health to feed students into those programs and for them to also study Chinese? But it is something where we're supporting the students and the university will continue to offer Chinese to those students next year. And we are trying to come up with some kind of structure where maybe our visiting scholars can offer the Chinese, so we can support the University of Montana in investing the resources that they need. But yeah, I mean, it's really important for us that our students be exposed to global engagement, critical thinking, community, and security interests. So, thank you. Yes.
First of all, thanks. Our family has also hosted Life Healing Fellows, and it's been amazing, and it was very sad that the last group was the last group. I know you guys went through a lot of cuts. You said 23 million in cuts from DOGE.
Yeah.
I was hearing about cuts to the Defense Critical Language Program.
Yeah.
Can you describe, how you're navigating that right now?
Yeah.
Because that seems alarming.
Yeah, it is pretty alarming because our nation's military needs to be supported when they are engaging in war scenarios or preventing war scenarios. And so when you're engaging with Iran, you need to know Persian. And that's just a pure America First perspective. When you are in intelligence and you're flying in a secret plane with the headphones and you're listening to Persian, you have to know what they're talking about, right? Or if you are engaging on the ground in Syria and you come across a community, you need to know, what is their religion? What does it mean? How does that impact you? How do you engage with them? So this is a very practical security need. So back in 2007, the University of Montana was successful in competitively bidding to host a U.S. Department of Defense language training center. And it started with a $1 million grant, and over the years it built up to $12 million because our programs are so good that we have excellent instructors here. And then we had about, how many people? About 50 people working for that program. Some were here, but some were also embedded at Fort Bragg in North Carolina and Fort Campbell in Kentucky and Joint Base Lewis-McChord in Washington. And so we had this presence of Montana expertise supporting our nation's military. And so that grant was not renewed. So that wasn't necessarily a DOGE cut, but it was something that was an administration choice to stop teaching language and culture on such a widespread basis. So there were 10 language training centers across the country, and they were all cut, not just the University of Montana. So we laid off most of those faculty. We still have about 6 that are working on very small, short-term contracts. Right now, well, I would say in the last year we've taught about 25 language courses, primarily in Mandarin, in Russian, in Arabic, but we're reaching a fraction of the students we used to reach. Like I think we've taught about 100,000 language hours compared to 800,000 language hours. And we have someone here on campus who does a lot of the culture training. So when something happens, like a U.S. invasion of Iran, and the military wants more of a historical context, so the military understands it, like he does that. So this person, his background is actually in Pakistan and Afghanistan, but he actually can teach to almost anything. So he's been teaching on Taiwan or China or on Iran or Saudi Arabia. And this is kind of the skills of this Defense Critical Language and Culture program, to be nimble, to be cost effective, to provide the military what it needs to meet America's national security priorities. So that has been a loss. We're hoping that that will be restored. It's actually a law that the U.S. Department of Defense is mandated to fund the language training centers, but they did not in FY25. And we had gotten indications they might by June 1st, but we've not heard anything yet. So, yeah.
Do you think the age of the great statesman or stateswoman is over?
The age of what?
The age of the great statesman or the great stateswoman, do you think it's over?
That's hope in action.
Yeah. I think that's what we need to meet the moment, right? They're out there. I think that the challenges of the moment are such that we're not seeing them be able to communicate in the way that they need to, given disinformation and misinformation and the challenges of communicating information. So I think they're there, and I think it's up to people like you and up to inspiring our youth to figure out, how do you consume information, and how do you find out who those great statesmen and women are, and how do you support them in making a difference. I can certainly think of some in existence today, and I'm sure that you can too, and it's the matter of how do you ensure that they get to amplify the message in a way that makes it different.
And have the longevity.
Great question. Yeah.
Do you happen to know how many Chinese nationals are studying at the University of Montana in, like this year, approximately?
How many Chinese nationals are studying here? If we have any, we might have 3. We have very few. So our peak of international students was around 2012, and we had about 800 international students. And then it declined, you know, along with the university not being able to invest in recruitment and marketing. And then there was the pandemic, and now there are the visa problems. So we have less than 50 international students physically at the University of Montana. Now we have a lot of online programs that support international students. For some reason, the physical therapy program is very popular with Filipinos. You know, you like grab one and they tell all their friends. So yeah, we don't have as many, and we'd love to have more Chinese here. Now, China is a very interesting case in the state of Montana because the state legislature passed a law maybe 2 or 3 sessions ago that you cannot accept money from the Chinese government. So, for example, there are many programs that the Chinese government runs that are fully funded for American students to go and study. In fact, we have a sister prefecture, a sister province, Guangxi. And Guangxi University is sending a delegation here in June. And part of this delegation is to say, hey, we have these great programs and we will provide lodging and meals to your students. They just need to pay for their airfare. But we can't promote those programs because for us to promote those programs means that we are accepting Chinese government money. So if students find those programs on their own and they figure it out and they go, then they can do it. But if it is promoted by the University of Montana, that is accepting Chinese government money. So, like, I get it, right? It's a communist system. It's a propaganda system. When you have American students go to China, there is, of course, that propaganda that is hitting them everywhere. But we think better of our students, and we raise critical thinkers, and we prepare them to go to China and hear what they're going to hear, and then analyze that and come out with their own independent thinking.
Well, just make a list. Take one of us along. Just give us the list, and then after you leave, we just give it a list.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
I have a little comment. I just heard that they're cutting aid for what they deem now, the administration deems to be doctorate programs, so you can't even do language. Like there's 11 now, I think that they picked, was like, you can get a master's or maybe not a PhD level now in musical language. Does that sound familiar? So
Is that,
just
you mean
now,
the federal government, or you hear it here at the
well, the
University of
federal
Montana?
government, so that would limit students to be able to go into these programs. Like my friend in school was like a German professor, like he couldn't even get PhD level funding now because they cut the aid, so they're saying, these are the tracks that you can go into. And it's so random, like chiropractic is one of them, but not languages. And so that's interesting inside of us.
So I don't know about that case in particular, but the Department of Education used to fund all sorts of language programs, like critical language programs and flagship programs and title programs, and those funded students, undergrad, masters, PhD students in languages, and a lot of those have been eliminated. So, I mean, we are going to see a big challenge in this country. So anyway, I have gone past my time, but I have really loved meeting with you, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Dina. We'll take another 3-minute break and then we'll get started with our meeting.